I want to welcome you. I want to thank you very much for inviting me. I've tried all night to learn the Chinese position about non-proliferation, but I guess I failed, so I asked Bob to take some of my time, and I will give you some observations from a very small country that I'm coming from. As Chief of Intelligence, which I served almost 6 years, you can be fired on two kinds of mistakes. One, if you underestimate the enemy and the enemy surprise you. Pearl Harbor, 1941, Barbarossa, Yom Kippur War, 73, head of intelligence were really cut off because of intelligence failure. But there is another kind of intelligence failure, which you overstate your enemy capabilities and intentions. And I think the intelligence community towards the Soviet Union in the 80s were something like that. Maybe the WMD fiasco in Iraq in 2003. So you are between two kind of mistakes. I call them alpha and beta. When you go to policy, you're basically in the same dilemma. There is a policy of doing too much, and there is a policy of non-action. And both of them can be a mistake. I think we are in a decade, after a decade, that the policy of doing too much, being too proactive, a lot of interventions told us, be careful. Be careful, and I agree with that. However, we still remember decades that we were not active, that we were not doing the right thing to preempt a threat, and we were negotiating or even imposing threats that later on we regret very much. So I'm coming from a nation which still remember things that happened 70 years ago, and we're still very careful not to miss an opportunity to deal with a threat when it is still can be handled before a big, big war with a huge cost. So without giving you the need to guess what I'm looking at Iran. And Iran is not an Israeli problem. It's the international community problem. It's the regime of non-proliferation problem. It's the future of who will be the hegemon in the Middle East. And I think it was not Israel that referred Iran to the Security Council, to the UN agency or independent international agency, IAEA. And the Iranian problem is there because it's a huge threat to the international community order. What is the Iranian strategy? It is a very sophisticated strategy, and to tell you the truth, it's quite successful. The Iranians are not going to the bomb as soon as possible, as fast as possible. They do go to the bomb as safe as possible, in a very careful pace that brings them into the threshold of a nuclear capability. And they are there. 10 years have passed since Rouhani was the chief negotiator for Iran, with almost zero nuclear capabilities, to 2013, when he is the president, and Iran has all the ingredients to break out for the bomb in a very short time. And this is the Iranian strategy, to be in the threshold with all the capabilities and find the right timing to break to the bomb. Why we are seeing a change? We are seeing a change because of the sanctions. And all the experts who were in the last couple of years busy in explaining that sanctions will not work and sanctions will rally the Iranian people behind the regime, they were wrong. The Iranian people is not rallying behind the regime. I think that they even don't like the regime. 30 years after the Shah was gone, 65% of the Iranians were born after the Shah is gone. And they don't blame him anymore. They don't blame even the big Satan or the small Satan. They blame their government. And they do want a change because the economy in Iran is in a bad shape. I don't want to go to the number of inflation, unemployment, drug addictors, corruption. People want change. And this is why they voted for Rouhani. They are willing now to compromise, and there will be, already started, a campaign of smiling, of changing the Ahmadinejad image of Iran. But as strategists, we have to look not to the PR campaign, but to the details, because the devil is in the detail. I think the negotiation is a very positive step forward. If something can be solved diplomatically, it should be solved diplomatically. But once again, remember some agreements that a year later have started huge world war. So the agreement should be an agreement that will make sure that Iran cannot break out to the bomb in a very, very short time. So what will be the parameters of acceptable agreement? On one hand, the Iranians should have the right to enrich. On another hand, the enrichment should be limited, should be with a limited number of centrifuges, and especially the huge stockpile that is now can support 7, 9 nuclear bombs should be shipped out of the country. We should pay attention to all the Iranians' dimension of the plan. It's not only the enrichment of uranium, it's the new reactor in Iraq, which creates another track, the plutonium track. And we should make sure that the agreement will take the clock backward, at least 2 years, in case that the Iranians violate the agreement. This is my measurement of a good deal or a bad deal. Diplomacy and military are going together. If you take the military option off the table, the chances that you will end up with no diplomatic solution is always there. Or let's put it in a positive way, the threat of military intervention is a condition to diplomatic success. We have seen it in Syria, we have seen it in many other places. However, before exercising a military threat, you should try all the other options and exhaust them, because there is no legitimacy for military threat if you don't try and exhausted all the other options. So this is kind of the relations between diplomacy and intervention. What kind of negotiation should we look at? The CBM approach have failed. For 10 years, we are negotiating about CBMs. Even the TRR deal in 2009 failed. By the way, Ahmadinejad wanted to accept it. But let's remind all of us who is making the calls in Tehran. It's the supreme leader. And Almaty 1 and 2 was a joke. So if we want to reach an agreement with Iran, if Iran wants the sanction to be lifted, we have to go all the way to the final goal. And the final goal, as I said, will be tested with the measure how far Iran is far from the nuclear bomb if Iran decides to go to the bomb. I want to finish with saying that there is an art of diplomacy and there is an art of war, and we have to combine both of them. We are all after a decade-long war. There are different interventions that can achieve a strategic goal in a tactical move. I've been there. And this is the art of war. If you can do one night operation and change the course of history, this is what you look for. If you only think that a war will be a decade long with no results, don't ever start it. And the same is the art of diplomacy. If you take out one instrument from policy, the diplomacy will fail. So this is the view from my country, and thank you very much for listening.